In Halifax today, what was supposed to be a protest is turning into a victory rally. At the center of it all, the statue of Edward Cornwallis. Now, he's the controversial founder of Halifax that many now see, through the filter of history, as a racist. The statue was supposed to be removed this coming Wednesday, but it was removed ahead of schedule. Organizers say their rally will still go ahead as planned, but this time it'll be a celebration. The statue and the pedestal are now in storage. Well, joining me now, early on a Sunday, Shawn Cleary. Now, he's a Halifax City Councillor who voted to have the statue removed, and he joins us from Halifax. Thanks for joining us, Councillor Cleary. Let's talk about why you voted to have that statue removed.
Well, so it had become an impediment to building a new relationship with the Mi'kmaq people here in Nova Scotia. It, as you mentioned, has a very controversial past. It was put up in 1931 by CN Railways, ostensibly to promote rail tourism. But it really, in the last 85, 86 years, has become a barrier to creating a new relationship with the Indigenous folks here. And in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, it was important that we deal with that.
Can we just re-emphasize the difficulty of the relationship between Cornwallis and the Magma?
Sure. So Cornwallis, of course, was the governor that was sent here to found Halifax as a garrison town, to create another military encampment for the British. And in 1749, he, of course, famously had the Scalping Proclamation. I guess going back to the mid-90s when Elder Dan Paul wrote his book, We Were Not the Savages, this has become, part of the narrative around Cornwallis was the brutality with which he treated Mi'kmaq people here in Nova Scotia. And of course, even before that, the Highland clearances, which he was responsible for, as they term it, the pacification of the Highlands after the Battle of Culloden. And so he was a pretty brutal guy to begin with in brutal times.
All these years later, still so relevant to discuss this. I understand, though, that after council voted to remove the statue, you received threats to your safety. What can you tell us about that?
We have been very fortunate to have received a lot of outpouring of support for removal of the statue. And of course, it's just a temporary removal. We will be looking at a panel. We'll be looking at what we do with it in the longer term. But there have been, at the other end of the extremes, a few interactions on social media, by email, by phone call, folks that are not terribly pleased with the idea, and some that were just downright racist. And one in particular came to me on Facebook, which was a threat to me personally.
The statue is gone. It's in storage, as you say. Its fate to still be decided. But what about the fate of the relationship with the Mi'kmaq community? How is that going to move forward?
Well, so beginning actually in 2015, Halifax City Council put together a motion, a statement on reconciliation. And so this is another step in that process. And we're very hopeful that we can work with the Mi'kmaq community, especially the Assembly of Mi'kmaq Chiefs here on the panel. It's an advisory panel to council to look at how we deal with Cornwallis, because we have other things too. We have Cornwallis Street. The statue that the park was in is still called Cornwallis Park. So what do we do with those? And more importantly, the second mandate for the committee is to look at how we recognize and commemorate Indigenous culture and history here in Halifax. And so we're very hopeful that we'll take another step towards reconciliation and rebuilding that relationship with Indigenous folks here.
And what about that statue? What does the city do with that?
Well, as you say, it's in storage until the panel of experts can come back with some recommendations on what to do with it. And I've heard everything from let's put it in a museum, let's have it in context, to let's melt it down or send it up on one of Elon Musk's rockets into outer space. So everything's open, but I think given that since 2015 and 2016 we have begun a dialogue on our history and this relationship, that I'm hoping that the learning, the reconciliation that can happen, we have learned so much about Cornwallis since we started talking about his statue than we did in the 85 years previous to that. So I think it's a good day for Halifax.